Hola, ¿cómo estamos? I'm Elia, and welcome to the 11th episode of Hable con Elia. This is a new video podcast in which I invite members of the artistic community from around the globe with the objective of having an open dialogue and getting to know more about their art, life, and mindset. You can listen to us live via Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. Typically, we do the live broadcast on Saturdays, but if you can't make it, just know that this will be available on all imaginable streaming platforms. I have the great, enormous pleasure to introduce to you all producer, mixer, engineer, and songwriter extraordinaire, Stephen James Aguilar from Heatmaps. Stephen, so great to have you here today. How's it going?
Good, man. Thank you so much for doing this. This is really fun.
This is great. I'm super excited to chat about the new record. Congrats! Just came out on Friday.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
It feels great, man. I mean, it's weird, you know. It's like, I mean, you know what it's like to work on something for so long, and then like, you know, it's like, it. You know, I think that like the best part is really the making it and the writing it. I think that's the part that like feels the most exciting, really, you know. And for a long time, you know, I would make records of my own music and not really promote them or stuff. I would just kind of, you know, put it out because it didn't, I don't know, that part, it feels like a different world, the promotion and the trying to get people to listen to it. I kind of was like, I don't know, I hope people find it, but there was no real way. And that was, you know, that was like early bands and stuff. And then, you know, and actually, you know this, when we were working on your EP, that was, you know, I played you a song that I was written, and you were one of the people who encouraged me to start putting out music again. And I hadn't in a long time. And so
I remember that. And I was actually going to mention that it was such a cool experience, obviously, to, you know, to be working with you on that first EP back in 2014 at, when Earwig Studio was in the Soto. And I remember that I think you asked me, like, or I think you were playing some songs or you were talking about it, and I asked you to play some songs for me. And I was just, I loved your music from the first instance that I heard it, because I thought it was just so powerful, and the sentiment was so pure and so sincere. And I was like, dude, you got to release this. This is so good.
Thanks, man. I mean, that experience, you know, just having you being so encouraging to me, it really meant a lot to me. I mean, it really did make a difference. And you know, it was one of the things that made me think like maybe I should, you know, and you know, for you know, one of the biggest reasons is just like that it really feels great to write songs.
It really does.
Like, you know, for mental health and all that. So
absolutely.
So yeah, so this record I started writing about 4 years ago. And most of it I made over the course of like a year and a half. That was kind of in the middle of that. But you know, it was a long project. And so putting it out, it's a relief in a lot of ways, because it's just like, well, you know, I can't do anything about it now. I can't change it. This is what it is. And then also it, you know, it's a relief because there are always things in every record that, you know, I mean, I've worked on so many records, and I don't always listen to them later. You know, I do every once in a while for fun. It's fun to see how far you've come in a lot of ways, you know, and just be like, oh, I would not do that now. And that's a good thing. It means that I'm making progress. But it doesn't, you know, it makes it hard to like enjoy stuff that I've worked on, depending on what it is. But like, so yeah, so this part of it is it's scary and also like a relief to be done. And like, and I have been listening to it a little bit, partially to like practice playing these songs and learning how to play them again, and all of that, and practice singing again. and I hear things that I'm like, well, I would change that, but it doesn't feel like the end of the world, you know.
Right.
Like there are a few things I'm like, well, that's what it is, you know, and that's
So
fine.
did you exercise that same process after releasing your first record, Let It All In? Did you spend more time, did more time pass before you listened to it again? Because it seems like you listened to it right after this record came out.
Yeah,
Did you have a different like approach to that first record where you didn't listen to it and then you just kind of give it some time?
I mean, I think that I did listen to it anyway,
Right.
you know, in a sort of masochistic way.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, you're
you
just
do
like,
it. You do
you're
it.
just like, oh no, did I embarrass myself? Did I say too much? Did I make something
Right.
bad? Does it sound bad? You know, and so it was just, you know, Let It All In. I finished in like, I think April or March of 2017, and then I put it out in January of 2019. So it was a year and a half before when it was just done, just sitting there. And so by the time I put it out, I had become more comfortable with the idea of putting out music again, and wasn't as like freaked out by it. And at the same time,
It's a great record too.
thank you. At the same time, it had been long enough that there were parts of it that I kind of felt like, this isn't totally me anymore.
Interesting.
You know, like and I felt, you know, I felt self-conscious, and it was scary. And but I think overall, like, I don't hate that record. I think it's fine. I'll, you know, that's the beginning of this project anyway.
Right.
And I'm not gonna like freak out and take it down the way I have with older projects of mine. But yeah, so it's been stressful, just, you know, the promotion stuff, and
Sure.
like,
It
and
happens.
and reaching out to people and wanting to, you know, connect and posting about it and all that.
Yeah.
It just feels like a lot, but I've gotten better at that side, you know.
Right.
That's not exactly my wheelhouse, but like I feel like with this one, I'm doing the best I can.
Absolutely.
And it seems like people are listening to it more than my last one, and so it feels like I can't be too hard on myself about that side. And it just takes a lot out of you.
It does take a lot, and it's such it's almost like a treacherous process with, you know, doing the PR and, you know, managing social media expectations and you know what the industry mandates or, you know, kind of suggests that an artist should do versus, you know, kind of your own instinct and organically trying to let the music in it. I think the great thing about it is, you know, you can only, it's the same thing with me, you know, like I already have so many responsibilities as a parent, you know, I have a day job, I have that my motto is just, I'll do the best I can, really. And then within that ability, try to do the best to, you know, expose the music to as many people. But I thought it was fantastic to hear KXP, you know, picking up on it and showcasing it. And I think that's there's almost something I was very I was just so content to see that, because it's like it took me back to the time when I heard your music for the first time when we were recording that EP, and I was like, your music has to be on KXP, like it has to be everywhere, because it's just and also just I was going to ask you this also, and we can kind of transition to this topic, which is the end product that you deliver is just so phenomenal. And I've always been very curious about what is your mindset like, because obviously with you working with so many artists throughout your life, and not only just building the catalog and experience of working with many artists and, you know, finishing completing work with other artists, how do you determine when your work is suffices your needs, or kind of like you're okay with how it sounds? Is that process different for your music? Like, do you put yourself in a different mental alignment versus working with other artists, you know, where you maybe have already kind of a habit or a structure or process in mind? or do you apply it the same way with your music, where you go through the same kind of
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
No, that's a good question. And that's kind of something that it is a little different with my music, and I think that with other people's records, they people will have things that they want to change or things
Sure.
that they want to do, and so of course there's the client, their sense of like when it's done,
right,
and then my sense of when it's done, and sometimes those are aligned and sometimes they're in different spots.
sure.
Sometimes the client's like, oh, I think it's great, and I hear a couple little things and I'm like, I need to fix that. And then sometimes the client catches a couple things and they're like,
right,
this doesn't feel right yet, and so then we go back and change those things, and
right,
and I thought it was done, but then usually they're right. We go
right,
back and change a couple things and I'm like, oh, that was a good catch. That's
right,
that's what's great about collaboration. And
right,
and I think that for me, I started recording to just record my music,
mm-hmm.
and that was when I was pretty young. I think I was 14, and so it's always kind of been I've learned a lot of the technical stuff, and I went to school for it, and I worked in studios and all that. But I still, it's easy for me to let technical stuff go with my songs. A lot easier than it is with a client, because
right,
I'm like, oh, this has to be great.
right.
And so I get everything, because you're excited about the project and you're working for somebody and you're getting paid and you're like, this has to be great.
Right.
And that was one of the things that I learned with doing Let It All In, because I didn't set out to make a record that time, which was unusual, because I think I made my first record my senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made I guess 4, and then I took like 10 years off and I didn't write. And then when I started writing again, I was just trying to finish a couple songs. I wasn't really thinking about releasing a record. I was just like, oh, maybe I could write a song again, and then I did, and then I recorded it, because that's a really big part of my process. Is like, as soon as I write it, I've got to demo it out, or a lot of times that ends up being the final recording,
Mm-hmm.
like the night I write it. And so so Let It All In, I recorded a couple songs, then I re-recorded them, and I recorded a couple more, and then it took a long time to write that record.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of different people played on it.
Right.
And it was just kind of like playing around. It was just kind of like an exercise of just like trying to get back into it, trying to write again. And so a lot of those sessions were kind of sloppy. Like, it
to
could have
your
sounded
view,
a lot better.
Right. To your ear, they were sloppy.
Yeah. Because I would just kind of throw stuff together and be like, well, this is good enough. It's just my record. Right. It's just my music. Nobody's going to hear it. And so that's why there are a whole bunch of different musicians, and it's recorded in all these different places, and it's kind of eclectic. Like, it does go together. And I tried to tie it together in mixing as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
But, by the time I got to the end of that record, I was really happy with it. But that was one of the goals for my next one, which is the one I just put out, was to like make it more cohesive, do it with as much of a set band as I could, and make it and take a little more time with stuff, and like not just like think like, oh, it's good enough it's just my stuff, because I think that I wanted to take it more seriously and feel like I'd really put everything into it. And so still, though, to get back to the question, like at the end, there were a couple things that I was like, I'm going to change this stuff and then I'm going to put it out. And I sat with it a little bit longer and I was like, nah, who cares?
Mhm.
I had time. I could have gone back and changed those things.
Right.
But I just thought, for one thing, like the feeling of it is so important to me.
Absolutely.
And it's not true for every single song on the record, but most of them, like the vocal was recorded the day that I wrote the song.
Okay.
It's just to capture like all of the emotion. And I feel like, and to not have the have the lyrics still be fresh and still like I'm still trying to remember
Vulnerable, right?
exactly. Yeah. And I for me that makes a huge difference. And
Yeah.
there were a couple that I went back to a couple I went back to re-record the vocal because I was sick or it just didn't like the way it came out. And it just wasn't like I didn't feel anything.
Sure.
And so I just scrapped it,
Okay.
There was one that like there's a song called Michael that I recorded like a demo of when I wrote it a few years ago and released just like acoustic version.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was the version that was like the night that I wrote it. And so then I re-recorded it because I did a band version. But I think outside of that, actually there's a song called Leaves. That one was re-recorded too. But I'm pretty sure that at least half of them, if not a little bit more than that, are like, the first couple times I sang it, and I think that like some, it's not perfect, but it feels like it's supposed to feel, and I think that the things that ultimately like bugged me a little bit, like were things that like didn't ultimately affect the feel of the record. And so it was just like, you know what, like if I go back and I fix these things, I'm going to find two more things. And if I fix those things, I'm going to find two more things. And I'm going to keep pushing this release out. And then at some point, I'm going to start cutting songs. At some point, I'm going to start writing new ones.
Right.
And then you get into this cycle where suddenly you've got a new record. And you scrapped the old one because you're sick of it. I'd rather just put it out, wait a year, I'll be sick of it then, and write something new.
That's crazy.
So that's what I get afraid of is just like there's just like a sort of countdown clock to where I don't feel that, because already I feel like the record's about big changes, and
Absolutely.
so there's the guy who wrote those songs isn't the guy who finished those songs.
Yeah, and there's so much beauty in that. Yeah.
If I'm at a certain point, I feel like I'm overstepping and like getting into some other guy's business. And I'm like, I don't know, that guy had some stuff to say.
Right.
I'm gonna let him say it.
Right.
And see this through. And then I've got new stories to tell and new records to make, and but this one is really special to me. I don't mean to. I haven't completely moved on.
I can tell. No, I think it's interesting what you're mentioning too. Time is such an interesting factor in all of this too, because as you change with time, the like you said, maybe that representation of what the concept of the vision of the record might be different from where you are now.
Yeah.
How
changed as I was making it.
Yeah, and it also changes as exactly, and that's what's so beautiful about. I feel like I don't know if I'm maybe I have a unique way of seeing it. Maybe others share this sentiment, but I find that records are these storytelling time machines, and it's you're not just capturing the music and the vibe or the sentiment that you're going through, whatever the case is that you want to represent through your art, but it encapsulates a time in your life. And it's there, and it's so powerful. And I was going to ask, how important was it for you to, I know that Jeff Pianki was a big part of recording this album.
Yeah.
I know that you have a lot of other really fantastic collaborators and musicians that participated in that. Did you rely on Jeff, on other people that you entrust through this process on making those final decisions and feeling, content with the final, the final completed work? Because I'm sure it's always this constant present questioning,
Yeah,
is it done? Should I add this?
totally. And yes and no. I've never recorded with like when I first started recording, it was just like out of necessity, right? It was just
Right.
like it was my dream to like work with a real producer.
Right.
And like, I just wanted to be the artist, right? And so it was just like, okay, how do I do this? Okay, I plug the mic in like this. Okay,
Go back
great,
to
whatever.
basics.
And then
Yeah.
I would just do it, and then over
Sure.
time you learn it, and then you're like, well, I guess that sounds kind of bad, and you whatever, right? But at this point, I still at some point I think it would be great to work with a producer and really like be produced. And I am not ready to make that record at this point. And so Jeff co-produced the record. And producer is a lot of different things, but I think that the like in action, you can it's whatever the artist needs to get
whatever the artist needs it to be. Exactly.
And so it can be a lot, it can be a little bit, it can be, it's whatever you need to get perspective. And and I really like to maintain control of my projects, and that's a big part of like why I make these, because I love collaboration and it's wonderful, but then I really like to have a space where it's like, awesome. If I fail alone kind of thing. And,
I like that.
And I really want to explore my ideas and stuff. That being said, like, Jeff is, a phenomenal writer, and he just has this sense of storytelling and feel that I admire so much. And so he was the person that I would show these songs to. And ultimately, I'd be like, is this any good? And he'd be like, yeah. I don't think that there was a case where I came to him and was like, is this anything? And he'd be like, no, or like, that sucks, or come back with this and give me another line for that, or whatever. He wasn't like, and he wasn't around for most of the recording. He was around for some of it. But he was definitely the person that I would show, and I'd like go to the studio and make stuff and then show him and be like, is this cool? And he'd be like, great. So he was like my encourager and my confidant, and also the person that I would talk through life with. And, we would go for walks and we would just talk about what's going on. And then that would end up being a song, or he would end up writing a song about what's going on with him. And so it was just, ultimately, and we had conversations about that, where I said, I want to give you co-producer credit. And he was like, I don't know if that's what I did, but okay. But it was, even though it wasn't him being there around the clock or him approving everything, it was a really vital role. I couldn't have done it. It just feels so good. When you're in a long-term relationship, it feels so good to just know there's somebody on your side, and just know that no matter what, you've got this person.
Yeah.
And in the musical world, in the world of this record for the last few years, Jeff was my person that I could go to and just be like, well, I don't care if anybody gets this record.
Right.
And it's same with Let It All In too.
Right.
Both of those records, he was the person that I'd be like, okay, I've got a new song. Okay, I think this is how I fit. It's just the person I could talk through it with. And I knew that if something felt off, he would point it out, because he knew what would feel right. And he did things like that. Like, he'd be like, that feels like you're strumming a little too hard, or that feels like you're, maybe you want to sing it a little bit more like this. And things like that I'd be like, oh, great perspective. And, even, when I was writing the song Leaves, I had this piece, and I knew what the song was about, and I had a melody, and I went over to his house, and I was just like, I wrote it like in front of him.
Oh.
And so I think I got through half of it, and then I had to drive somewhere, and I wrote the rest like in my head.
That's so cool.
But
I'm
So
going to listen
ultimately
to
he
it
didn't get
now.
the lines in, but
I'm
he
going to
wrote
listen to
the
it now, knowing that that's the
yeah.
story behind it.
There's
That's
more
so
to that
awesome.
story too. It's interesting, but
It's so important, and that's why I was going to ask you, because I feel that it's through any artistic process. I mean, for example, I'm the type of person that I really need that direction, and
yeah.
I got that from you when we were singing, recording the vocals, especially, and I loved how you were like directing me in a way where, like, let's get those emotions out, as opposed to just
Yeah.
singing the song just because
Yeah.
that's the song. And feeling vulnerable when you're feeling vulnerable and having those moments, that builds chemistry, but that also builds, respect and admiration. And it's so vital to have someone that you respect their opinion, because that they're going to give you an objective opinion
Yeah.
and a constructive feedback about something, as opposed to just being like the typical standard good friend that just
Right.
yays to everything.
Or even
But
better, it's really good. Like if you love somebody's taste,
mhm.
you want their subjective
Yes,
opinion, and that's what I wanted from
also
Jeff. And
exactly.
so I really wanted his taste, and if something felt off or weird, I really don't care what it's like
I
objectively.
like that. I like that.
I want to know like what he thinks is cool,
Yeah.
and obviously, it's I've got to think it's cool too. But there are things that you just can't have perspective on, and
Yeah.
yeah. For example, another thing that Jeff did is on a few of the songs, Keep Changing, Michael, and probably another one, but definitely those two.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Another Door Opens.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff recorded he came to the studio with me, and so he was tape op. So he was actually hitting record,
nice.
giving me a new take.
Okay.
And being like, okay, a little more like this, a little more like that.
Sure.
And I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna try to be a singer, and I'm just gonna do whatever he tells me. And
I love that.
we just get a bunch of takes, and then when I felt like I got it, I'd be like, okay, I think I got it, we're done. and then I went back by myself and put it together,
right.
and would comp and all that stuff. But like, that was really helpful to just like be like, okay, I'm the artist right now, and I'm just gonna sing, and he's gonna tell me do another one. He's gonna tell me take a bigger breath. He's gonna tell me, you right. sound weird here, or whatever it is.
Right.
And that's a big deal. You know, it's really helpful for vocals, especially to have that. Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about so my favorite songs of the record. I love the record, and I'm going to transition to also the other topic, which is organizing the tracks. And because you do a phenomenal job with that, and I know that's something that you enjoy doing.
I do.
But it's so seamless. It really, like,
awesome.
I was looking at the timing. It's like it's a 30-minute record. Yeah. It does not feel like a 30-minute record. It feels like just a beautiful movie, like
awesome. That's
and
what
it doesn't it doesn't give you this. When I looked at it, I was like, this is not a punk record. Come on. Like this is a serious record, and it just it speaks volumes about the work, because it's so fulfilling too to the soul, and I at least that's how I take it. But my favorite songs obviously Keep Changing, I'm Terrified, I love. But I think my favorite song of the record that I've been listening to back and forth has been Brave and Stranger.
Oh wow. Cool.
Because I don't know, I just it just the guitar and your vocals, and the vocals on that also sounded a little bit different. They're very cool. I just love the layering of the vocals. But and I know that you mentioned is it too late as part of the lyrics. But I love the structure of the song. There's just something about it that I just like. It just brings me to tears, and it just gives me goosebumps, and I'm like, I want to listen to this again. It's just so good.
That's so cool.
Tell me a little bit about this song, if you can.
Yeah. So it's well, another thing that it was Jeff's influence is that I really love how Jeff his guitar is always in a weird tuning. And
awesome.
And he does that to just like,
to be unique.
When you've been playing a guitar a long time, you tend to go to the same shapes and the same kind of stuff. And you know, it's one of the reasons, like for Let It All In, I wrote you know, a good number of those songs on piano, which I don't play. I'm terrible at piano. You know, like I can just kind of make chords and kind of pluck, you know, find a melody and that kind of thing. Play something pretty simple, but my my ignorance makes it like a well of endless possibility. Not endless, because I can't do much, but I surprise myself. So I can sit there and kind of mash on the keys and then find something that I would. There is no like go-to thing on piano for me, and I like keeping it that way, at least at this point, where I can be creative there, because every melody has an equal likelihood of happening, because I have no idea what I'm doing. And I really like that changing tunings on my guitar too, because it makes me a total beginner again. And it's like there's no go-to chord, because I don't know how this tuning works. And so a lot of times I would go to Jeff's house and pick up his guitar and try to play some same old thing
with whatever tuning he had in.
Yeah, and it would come out sounding insane, and I'd be like, "Oh no, I can't." So then I just have to like. So a lot of times when I was at his house, I just try to write something on his guitar, and then try ask him later, like, "What is this tuning?" And I have to write it down. And so,
so the guitars are the tuning that.
It's I can't even remember what it is. I have to like. It's like in a note in my phone.
It sounds so good.
It's the same tuning as Kidding.
Okay.
So Jeff had his guitar in this tuning, and I found this this little this melody and I wrote this instrumental piece, which ended up being the introduction to Kidding. And I really loved it, and I wanted to just have an instrumental song, and I was like, is that weird? I don't know, but but then I was like, okay, I'm going to try to write lyrics to it. And I couldn't, but it turned into a totally different song, which was Brave and Stranger.
Wow.
And then later I did successfully write lyrics to it, and that became Kidding. So those are in the same tuning, and they're related in that way.
That's awesome. See, that's why I love this.
Very different.
You hear more.
Wow. And then, you know, it's, yeah, you know, it came out pretty quickly, and then I recorded it right away, just 2 vocals and 2 guitars.
Yeah.
And it's just about having this realization that, like, if there are things that I need and things that I want and really realizing like what those are, and realizing that your life has to totally change in order to even pursue those things, and thinking like, am I too old to be happy? Like, am I too old to change my life that drastically for a shot at getting those things? No guarantee. Like, is it too late to like make my life worse on purpose for a chance at it being better? And, you know, it is super emotional for me too. Yeah. And like, honestly, like, you know, that one of the tests for me is that every song has to make me cry while I'm writing it. And if it doesn't, then it's probably not getting at the truth. And so that is true of every single song on this record.
Wow.
I've, you know, a big part of recording this record was, you know, just editing out all the crying. And so that song was, you know, also like when I'm writing, like I write songs not because I figured something out and I want to get it off my chest, or I figured something out and I want to share it.
Right.
It's that I don't know what to do. And writing it is, you can hear me in the lyrics in real time, figuring out, what am I going to do? Who am I? How do I answer these questions? And having some kind of some kind of realization, big or small. And so that's what that song is like, figuring out like, all right, well, I'm coming to terms with the fact that like my life has not gone the way that there are needs that aren't being met in my life because I didn't pursue those things.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm recognizing that, and now that I'm accepting myself, part of accepting yourself is accepting that like you can't pretend everything's fine if it's not.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you're accepting your own needs, and then being like, okay, so then what do we have to do to change this? And you know, in the second verse I say, from now on I'll be brave and stranger. Like from now on, like I'm going to take risks I didn't used to take, and I'm going to be a little bit more of a weirdo. I'm going to just like get out there and make changes. And like, you know, I belong in the face of danger is the beginning of the thing. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
realizing like I've had, you know, when you're afraid of conflict, you build yourself this sort of isolation.
You impede it.
Yeah. And you just kind of like withdraw, and it's like, you know, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. It's
right.
time to like, and it's not like, the statement isn't like I belong in the face of danger because I'm like this brave adventure, like no. I'm just so whatever. Like it's like we all, like when we're really living, when we're really honest with ourselves, like we belong in that scary place where we're actually trying to go for the thing that we need, and we're actually
really need.
trying to find love and acceptance and like love and acceptance for ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
And so
love that.
So that's what that's about. And I also try to, as much as possible, it's my taste to not answer questions in my songs, to just find the question I think is the most interesting thing.
That's beautiful.
And so that's why it doesn't really resolve. It figures out just like, is it too late? And like the implied answer is no. That's the conclusion that I've come to, is that like, of course not. But it really, you know, sometimes like you feel something, and once you say it out loud, you're like, I know exactly what to do. And in my head and in my body and in my heart, when I felt like, is it too late to be happy? Is it too late to try to be happy?
Mm-hmm.
That felt like a really valid question. And then saying it out loud, I immediately was like, no, of course not. That's the advice I would give someone else. But when it comes to you, when it comes to me, I'm in the same way that, you know, I was saying, sometimes I could be a little lazy with my own recordings, because in a way that I'm not with other people's, because ultimately you're like, well, I can take it. It doesn't matter. It's just my song. You know, I'm uncomfortable. Maybe I'm a little unhappy, but it's just me. It's just my feelings.
Right.
And, you know, I don't want to live like that. Nobody should. And so yeah, that's what that one is about.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's so profound, everything you said. And I love that it's there's so much discovery in making music or art, whatever it is, you know, anybody does in life. And I like that I think we're always constantly trying to resolve or find resolutions or find the answer, you know, but it's more the acknowledging the question, finding what it is, you know, that is, you know, bugging you, or what are the things that you need. And you said it so well. That's beautiful. And that's why I wanted to ask, because I feel like that's what I perceived also from the song. And and it's just such a beautiful song. I seriously love
Thanks
it.
so much, man.
I
Yeah.
really, really do.
And all
as
those,
everything that you make, but it's yeah, I thought it was very impactful to talk about it, because the way that you just described everything is so powerful in its own way, and realizing that that's been the process for you, and understanding that, and then after you recording, you know, it's just part of it, you know. Um, Kind of switching to other topics. When did your love for music start? Tell me a little bit about, you know, your childhood. You know, I'm assuming something influenced you, or I don't know what the case was,
yeah,
but tell me a little bit about, you know, where did it start? How did it start? And then we can kind of take from there to, you know, what are some of the
sure.
artists that you grew up listening to, and so forth.
Um, well, I mean, yeah, I think that like music was always around. My mom played piano, and my dad would always sing, you know, and my mom would sing to
Mm,
me like, you know, when I was a little kid, you know,
sure.
going to sleep and that kind of thing. But my dad um, has just always been an exuberant singer and just loves music so much that he is just always um, you know, by himself in the kitchen singing his heart out. And a lot of times it's, you know, it's a lot of old songs, and
Hmm.
sometimes it's just like a line or two from a song over and over. And we used to, you know, sing along to the radio together.
Sure.
And when I was a kid in the car, and actually even still sometimes. but um but yeah, my dad is just really passionate about music, and he never learned an instrument, but he just is such a huge I mean, fan is the wrong word, because he's just like uh I really think that he should have been a songwriter, and in some capacity, because he just has that passion for music, and he listens to it in this deep way. And so being around that, and just being around, you know, listening to the songs that my dad loved. um you know, then I started taking piano lessons like when I was like 5.
Hmm.
um I didn't get good, as I've previously stated.
Right.
You know, I played piano for a little while,
Sure.
and then I started playing the trumpet
Oh.
in elementary school. I played for about 4 years, and then I quit, and then I played. I took drum lessons for a year in 7th grade, and then 8th grade I started playing bass, and that was the one that really like clicked for me.
Clicked. Yeah.
That I was like, oh, this is, because I felt like, oh, I love music so much, but then when I would play it, I just didn't ever get good enough or love an instrument enough to really like um, love music while I was playing it.
Mm.
And playing bass, that really changed. So yeah, I think it was the summer before 8th grade I started taking lessons, and that, you know, I was playing along to the radio, and I was playing along to you know, CDs that I had, and it just felt exciting. And I started a band with some friends, um, and then I was in a couple bands in high school,
Hmm.
and then at the end of 8th grade I started playing guitar um, and writing songs, um, and yeah, it was like end of the school year. It was like right around this time exactly, 1997, and and I was interested in writing, you know, pop songs. You know,
Right.
like there was a I listened to The End here, and in Seattle, and Marco Collins was the DJ that I listened to all the time.
Hmm.
And there he's on KEXP now.
Right.
And there's a band called Super Deluxe that was a local band that they were my
Uh-huh.
favorite band ever. I mean, I was just like obsessed with them. And they wrote like these power pop songs. They were into the Posies, so they sounded a little bit like the Posies, but um, these great harmonies.
Hmm.
And I still, I love singing along to music, and I tend to just find the background parts and learn all the harmonies, and like I'll like
Nice.
sing part and then drop out and then come back in for the harmony part. And I really, really like that part. And so that's why my songs have these harmonies, is that
Yeah.
just like I I like being the backup guy more than I like being the main guy.
It's
But
so
then I write
funny.
these songs and I don't want anybody else to sing them. So it's like, well, I guess I
Sure.
got to do it. But but yeah, because in the band that I was in, I was never the singer. I was just like, the bass player.
Right.
And but yeah, my dad really loved Amy Grant. And so we listened to a lot of Amy Grant when I was a kid, and I still am such a huge fan of Amy Grant. This it's like Christian country pop, kind of, not Nashville pop. It's not country, but her voice is just kills me to this day. That's my dream, is to do something with her.
Oh my gosh, you gotta make it happen.
And yeah, gotta make it happen. I'll give her a call. But yeah, so that was a really early childhood like music love. And then when I started listening to the end, it was around it was in 5th grade, and that's when like Weezer was breaking through, and Kurt Cobain had just died.
Right.
And that those 90s bands, Beck was starting to get big. And I got so interested in new music. That was one, like, the signature things of that radio station, was that they were always debuting things. And Marco was like the first person to play a lot of bands, but among them like Beck and Weezer and Nirvana and Pearl Jam. And so I had this idea of just like, it was almost like this addiction of just like, I have to be listening all the time,
right?
Because I want to be the first person to hear
to discover
songs. Yeah, they're just like, it's brand new music, right. And when you're a kid, it's different. Like it's harder to listen to new music as you get older. I still do,
yeah,
but it takes practice.
It does, and I think that's the thing that's so special about growing up in the 90s, is that now it's instant gratification. Kids are just listening. It's even like the way that with my daughter, like, we're listening to music, like she's just, and I'm trying to, I don't want to say regulate, but I'm trying to control the way that she's consuming music, because I feel like it's almost like it's not like organic. It's just like she listens to something and then it's it just goes from there.
Right.
So we've been listening to a lot of radio
at any time.
We've been listening to a lot of radio station, because now that I take her in the mornings to go take her to school, and she has an amazing, one of the things that she has that I've been always terrible at, and she gets it from her mom, is that I have terrible memory. Like I don't remember songs, or like I remember artists, but I don't remember specifically like records or CDs. She's built this capacity of storing all this information in her brain.
Wow.
And now we're like listening to music, and she's like, "Is that B-52s? Lobster Rock or something like that?" And I'm like, "Yes."
I was that way too.
And so, I growing up in the 90s, the beautiful thing was discovering art. Like for example, when MTV actually used to show music videos, as opposed to now, which is completely the contrary. I discovered so many bands that way that I was just in awe, and so the other exercise that unfortunately I've stopped doing because of COVID was going to record stores. I've discovered so much more music through record stores than in any other. Like just going to Easy Street, and when I used to live in West Seattle, and I've discovered so much music that way, and I love that feeling of recognizing, oh my gosh, how did I not know about this band? And then like obviously I'm not scared to ask. And I remember I asked this guy at Easy Street Records, and I was like, "Is this I forget what I was like, is this what's this band?" I reference a band, and he's like, "No, this is actually Built for Spill." And I was like, "Are they current?" And he's like, "No. I mean, they still play, but the stuff we're listening to is from the 90s." I'm like,
Yeah.
"How did I not know this?" And I discovered like Prefab Sprout, which has been probably one of my most important references. And I think I can say that's one of my favorite bands. And I discovered it in LA at this random record store. And anyways, but going back to what you're saying, you know, discovering music through listening to new things is just so fascinating. Because
I mean, the radio was a big deal for me, and then also, going to record stores, was huge. And I think that, you know, I'm not sure when that started, but probably, well, I think actually I do know that like in 5th grade, because my brother got it. I have an older brother, and so he definitely exposed me to a lot of music. So there was like those elementary school years where like I heard a lot of what he was listening to.
Sure.
That was like more current, and some of it was interesting to me and some of it wasn't, you know, or some of it I didn't really think about whether or not it was interesting to me. I just heard it a lot, you know, like I remember he got into U2 for a little while, and I was probably in 4th grade or something, and so I heard a lot of U2, and I was like, I mean, I don't know, I've heard it a lot. There are a couple songs that I liked, you know, and then I remember he started getting into like Dave Matthews Band, and I was listening to that, and I was like, this is interesting. I've never heard anything like this. I don't know what, and no one really, at least like in, like, certainly not in my 4th grade friend group, had any idea who that band was. And so it just felt like this other world to step into. And then I think, in 5th grade is when I started buying music. I remember going to Silver Platters, and I bought the cassette single of Kiss from a Rose by Seal.
Nice.
And I bought the CD single of Gangster's Paradise.
Love it.
Leo. And
were those the two first purchases that you?
Yeah, it was the same day. I can't remember. It was in my head, like we had to go to 2 different record stores because I knew exactly what I wanted and they didn't have both.
I love Seal. It's such a great song.
Batman Forever soundtrack.
I bought the Batman Forever soundtrack because of that song, and then I was exposed to like U2 and all these other bands.
Totally, and I think Smashing Pumpkins had a song on there. But yeah, and then you know, and then I think in 7th grade was when I started getting to like Super Deluxe was a big deal, and then you know. I think 6th, 7th grade, like I think Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness came out, and that was a big record for me. I liked Weezer okay. I liked the singles. I didn't really own their records until later, but that was really big on the radio. And yeah, you know, I mean, it was different because like you couldn't listen to anything all the time, right? You hear a single on the radio and be like, I think I'm going to buy the record. And you just go, and maybe they'd have it at a listening station, but a lot of times you just paid $15 and you're like, well,
that's how it was.
I like it.
That's how it was.
And then I'd listen to, you know, there's a ton of music that I haven't listened to that's like cool. And like, you're supposed to know these classic records. And I still haven't really heard them because when I grew up, I only had, you know, I had a lot of CDs, but at the time that was like 20 CDs, and I would listen to the same record for like months, you know, because I just get so obsessed with it, or I get obsessed with a song and listen to it over and over and over. And I was really interested in recording always. My dad is also a photographer. And he's a really talented photographer. And so, and he just loves, you know, it's the same thing, you know, and composing a shot to where it looks beautiful. And you're also capturing a moment. You're capturing this emotion. You look at it and it's this moment frozen in time that's also beautiful. It brings back these memories. Oh, there are a couple of other things I want to add. So when I was, I think, around 5, for a Christmas present, my dad and mom made this like slideshow. My dad had a camcorder, and he set this like photo slideshow to music, which was really labor intensive. Like,
I can
they
imagine.
had it, like, playing on the stereo, and then
Sure.
he did it like stop motion. He would like film a photo for a second and then stop it and then put
That's
another
so
photo.
beautiful.
There's all these family photos, and he put it to this Amy Grant song,
Of course.
called "If These Walls Could Speak." It's written by Jimmy Webb, who wrote Wichita Lineman, and he wrote. He's amazing, one of the great songwriters, and is really nostalgic and just gorgeous. And it was all these family photos, and he sent that slideshow as a gift for his parents, for my grandparents, that Christmas. And so I remember, they spent so much time on it, and I heard that song so many times. It's my favorite song of all. It's my favorite recording of all time.
And your favorite song.
And my favorite song. But at the time, it would make me so nostalgic, and it made me feel happy and sad at the same time. It would bring me to tears.
Right.
And I was so fascinated by that feeling.
Wow.
Because I was 5, I was like, I feel so nostalgic, and I only remember the last 2 years. Like, what do I miss? Like, I don't even,
right.
What's going on?
You're so connected to music.
Yeah. So it's just finding that feeling, like, what's happening to me when I listen to this song? How does it work?
Oh,
and that's really the hook for me. And that's what my dad loves about music too, is like, these songs make him feel things. They take him back to a certain time. And that's really what got me hooked. And that's still why I wanted to write songs. That's why I wanted to record songs. That's why I love recorded music, is just figuring out, like, how does it work? How can I make somebody feel something? How do you tell a story in a way that lands recorded? And that is so interesting. Another thing from my childhood is that we would go on road trips to see my grandparents, because they lived in California and we lived in Seattle. So we would go on these long road trips for Christmas or Thanksgiving, and my mom would have these little, like, entertainment packages for me and my brother, because we were sitting in the back seat for hours and hours. So we would usually get a sketch pad. I know sometimes we got like an Etch-a-Sketch, sometimes we got like a like car games, license plate or whatever, where you're just like, whatever that is, like a scavenger road thing. But another thing that she would do is she would give us a new cassette. Of some music,
What a treat.
So we'd have our like Walkman, and we'd have something to listen to. And what I noticed immediately is that when I'd get back from the trip, whenever I'd listen to that tape, it would bring back all these memories and make me feel the way I had felt a couple weeks ago. And I thought, this is amazing. It's like a hard drive for memory. It
really is.
And for your feelings, that like, I can take myself back to these places. It's a time machine. And so I started doing this, through college, like through when, until I stopped buying CDs. I would buy a new record and not listen to it until I'd go on a trip, so that I wouldn't forget these trips I'd been on.
That's crazy.
And it worked. I have these records, and I know, what trip I was on and where I went and who I was with, and these specific memories associated with every song. And so those experiences, combined with just knowing, like, a song would come on the radio and my dad would be like, oh, this takes me back to when I was in college, and I did this, or this takes me back to when I first met your mom and we were at this library and we were she said this to me, and I was singing this, or I was waiting at this bus stop and I was wearing my my naval uniform, and this hitchhiker, this guy picked me up because I was hitchhiking. You know, he has this like catalog of memories,
very vivid. Yeah,
very vivid, and I do too. And so so really that's what I'm interested in, and it takes it one step further,
right.
if I'm writing the songs.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
you know, then the memories are really in there, and they're really like stored in a way that I think is really valuable for me to have, so that I can really remember like what I learned, you know. So for me, like this record is this new one. It's like, this is what my life was the last 4 years. This is everything I've learned. This is all the breakthroughs that I've had personally, and that I've learned about life and myself, and and a lot of those are really hard lessons that I haven't fully incorporated yet. And so there are things that like I have to remind myself of, you know. It's not like I'm you know, trying to impart all this wisdom on everyone else. It's like, oh, I thought of this thing that's going to be really hard to do. I'm going to write it down so I don't forget to try to incorporate this, and challenge myself in this particular way. And yeah, so that's kind of
I love that.
It's a big part of the relationship for me.
And it's also so I mean, I keep telling this myself, you know, because it's like you inject all this money into the you know, the making of a record, and you know, doing the PR, and you know, working with the people that can create the videos, you know, for the video for the music to stand out, and you know, you're just putting money and money, and then ultimately, like, I've come to realize that it's such a personal thing. You know, it's like you do it for yourself. Obviously, you do it for the people that support you, and you know, your family, that, and the people that truly genuinely enjoy, you know, the art that you're creating. But I also feel that besides having that, maybe this is just my current mindset on music and this whole process of making music, but I feel that what you just talked about is also so important, you know, in that why not generate that same message and amplify it, and let the music speak, you know, and I, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna be here just, your music is genuinely very touching, and everything that you're just mentioning is exactly how I experience music. And your record is exactly the same way that I experience music. Your record is my trip to Ecuador this next 2 weeks. Like that's it, and it's I love that we're talking about this too, because we're very, very similar. It's crazy. And I guess we just never talked about these things. You know, we have a very similar, my dad was also never played an instrument, but he's the reason why I love music. I have older brothers. I listen to you through my older brothers too. You know, I my first 2 CDs were like, I bought like, you know, the Pocahontas soundtrack and Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt.
Oh, that was huge for me.
Huge. But I mean, yeah, that's all. But regardless of all those things,
I was learning bass to that record. It's true. That and Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Californication.
Like, those were my bass practice.
Oh my gosh, did you actually? You know what I used to do? I would listen to music in my room really, really loudly.
Yeah.
And I would untune my guitar to let the strings feel like they were like a bass string. Like, you know, just like completely loosened from and I would just imagine that I was like Flea, you know, like, and I would do the whole soundtrack, the whole album, you know.
That's awesome.
You know, and I would just like, I would bleed on my like red, you know, like not Fender, I forget the name, whatever the name was of the Strat that I had, but the same thing happened with the Squire. Yeah, I had the classic Squire Strat, and I had the same experience with, you know, with Tragic Kingdom. Like I would just emulate the same bass line, you know, over and over again.
I mean, it felt like you were in the band. I mean,
I would do that. That was my thing. But the main thing I was going to mention is listening to music. I listen to music the same way that you just mentioned, described. I can listen to records that I have, and I listen to a record for like 4 months,
Yeah.
4 6 months, and then I stop.
Uh-huh.
And I purposely do it, and I don't go back to it until a few years later, or a few months later. It typically is 2 years later or whatever, and then I listen to it, and it just always takes me back to that moment.
Yeah.
You know, and there's just something so beautiful about that, and I love that you're sharing all these things because, you know, obviously you've been a producer and for other artists, and obviously working with artists is also, I'm sure it's fulfilling for you as well.
Yeah.
But doing your own music and channeling that sentiment that you had when you were a kid, and the reason why you're doing music, and the reason why all these things are happening, and the reason why you released this record, it's just so beautiful. The whole cycle and the connection of everything is just so so amazing and incredible. And
Yeah.
and if I can say something about your record, is that you are achieving that. You're achieving that sentiment. You're achieving that emotion. You transmit it so beautifully that, you know, I connect to it right away. That's exactly the same way that I felt about your music when you played it the first time. That's the same way that I felt when I listened to Brave and Stranger for the first time. I mean, I had the luxury of listening to some of your demos before they came out when we were living in LA.
Yeah.
And I was just, it's just not just such an honor, but it's like your music is really really amazing. It really really is amazing.
Thank you so much.
And I wanted you to know that you're fulfilling and you're actually completing the goal that you had in mind, and you're doing it, and you're doing it so eloquently and so genuinely. You're also just so you're so sincere, and I think that speaks volumes too, you know. And I will do my best to try to get your music to as many ears as possible, and I'll take it to Ecuador. And I know that a lot of my friends do follow you and listen to your
That'd be
music.
so cool.
And, you know, I just, thank you for sharing your music, man. It really really I feel like it's a blessing to just listen to your music.
Thanks so much, man. Yeah, I just, you know, I want to, you know, there's a big part of it that is, of course, for me to just work through stuff, but then once it's completed, and also in the way that I write and arrange things, you know, I want things to land the first time you hear it. You know, I want people to get it, and it's not about like them understanding me as much as like I want people to hear their own story in it. You know, I want people to be moved, and people to be like, you know, I feel this way too. And also, you know, I have these questions too, and I never thought about it that way. Or I really want it to be a comfort, you know, and I want to challenge and inspire people to like accept themselves. And also, you know, this is a record about grief. It's a record about loss. And I think that like, you know, I had a tough couple of years, and I think I got a preview of some of the things that a lot of people went through in 2020. You know, I did too, but I was also going through that stuff in 2019, and I was able to write this record that I do think is relevant culturally. And I hope that I know that other people have experienced loss in the last year and experienced grief, and I hope that like one of my biggest dreams for this record is that it can comfort people, and it can help people process that, and express that for people who don't make art, and people who don't even talk about how they're feeling, or have difficulty processing that. I hope that like that people hear the record and they hear the arc. You know, you said it's like a film. You know, that's how I want it to be. I want it to be this process of acceptance that you go through, and it cycles, because life does.
It really is,
you know. And so by the end, the last song, you know, is really about acceptance, and then it starts over again, and changes happen again. And then you have to accept that and go through that grieving process. And So it's really is my hope with this that people hear their own story and you know, more so than people being like you know, because a lot of the record is fiction and a lot of it is very, very real, you know, but the emotion of it and the themes are all really real.
And that they're open for interpretation. I like that.
Yeah.
You know, that
Yeah.
someone might have a different a different reaction or a different perspective.
Yeah. I
But
hope they do.
it's creating that dialogue, you know, that internal dialogue. I think is even so profound, and that's how that's the beauty of music, that it connects souls. You know,
Yeah.
Do you have plans on, you know, granted, you know, we'll see how things continue to progress with COVID, but do you have any interest in playing these songs live at some
I
point?
do. Yeah. I mean,
Nice.
I would love to. And I have to yeah, we'll see what that looks like.
Right.
I'd love to play these with a band, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, it'd be I love the players on the record. I don't, you know, they're in LA, so it wouldn't happen up here, but I yeah, I'm looking to put that together.
Yeah.
It'd be so fun to play these songs live, but if I end up playing by myself, that's cool too.
That's
I've
also
done
cool
that.
too. Nice.
But yeah, so not set plans at this point. I just you know, I'm still just seeing what's next.
Right. What
But
the hell's
I
gonna
hope
happen?
that I hope that gets to be a part of it.
I hope so too. It'd be a treat to see you live again. I had the great fortune of seeing you in LA.
Yeah, that's the last show I played. Was
That's crazy.
that
That's
will be it.
crazy. Steven, before we go, how can people find your music and just find out more about your project? I know that, you know, Instagram, Bandcamp, and
Yeah.
are probably like the main
So
channels.
yeah, the project's called Heatmaps. The new record is called Kissing Teeth, and then the Instagram is at _Heatmaps_, and on Bandcamp it's heatmapsband.bandcamp, and yeah, Spotify, Apple Music, all of those, it's up there.
And it's available for purchase on Bandcamp.
It is,
So
yeah,
should...
and on iTunes and
Right.
and Amazon Music and those things too.
Perfect.
So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, my friend, this was incredible honor. Really awesome chatting with you, getting to know more about you and your art and your project. Yeah, just what a treat to have you here. Thanks so much
Thanks,
for
man.
your
Yeah,
time.
likewise. It's really nice talking to you.
Yeah,
it's good to see you too.
Yeah, likewise. Hopefully we can see each other more often now that...
I'd love that.
Hopefully
Yeah,
things get better.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah,
Well,
and to
have
all...
a wonderful trip.
Thank you so much. And to all the listeners, thank you so much. Gracias. And remember to be kind. Peace.